The Mafia Boss was 3 seconds away from killing the new waitress when his hidden camera showed her doing the one thing he'd forbidden anyone to do to his blind daughter. She was teaching her to dance. His hand was already on the gun in his desk drawer. The rage that had kept him alive in his world for 20 years burned white hot behind his eyes. But then his daughter laughed, and the sound stopped him cold. He hadn't heard that sound in 3 years. Not since the morning a car bomb meant for him had taken his wife's life and stolen his daughter's sight in the blast that shattered their Chicago brownstone into rubble and smoke. The guilt had consumed him slowly at first, then all at once. He'd moved them to this penthouse fortress on the 63rd floor, installed bulletproof glass on every window, stationed armed men at every entrance, but the real protection came from the 47 cameras hidden throughout the apartment, tiny lenses embedded in smoke detectors, picture frames, the spines of books on shelves his daughter would never read. He told himself it was necessary, that he needed to see every person who came near her, every hand that touched her, every moment when she was vulnerable. The cameras had caught things. A physical therapist who grew impatient when his daughter moved too slowly. A nurse who spoke to her in the voice people reserve for pets and toddlers. The previous caretaker who'd been fired just last week for taking medication meant for his daughter's headaches and pocketing the prescription refills for herself. Each violation had been dealt with swiftly, coldly, the way he dealt with everything in his world, but none of them had made his daughter laugh. His daughter sat in her room now most days, 9 years old and already carrying the weight of loss that made her seem ancient. She barely spoke anymore. The doctors said she was processing trauma, that blindness at 6 years old required extensive adjustment, that patience was essential. But he knew the truth the cameras showed him every day. She wasn't adjusting, she was disappearing. The interview with the new candidate had been routine. She'd arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better years, her resume thin enough to read in under a minute. 26 years old. 3 years at a diner downtown. No formal caregiving experience. References from a former landlord and the diner's owner, both brief but sincere. She needed the money. That much was obvious in the way she sat in his office, back straight, hands folded, trying not to stare at the view of Chicago stretching behind his desk. He'd given her the list of rules. Medication schedule, meal requirements, physical therapy appointments, boundaries. No sudden movements around his daughter. No loud noises. No attempting to engage her in activities beyond what the occupational therapist prescribed. Follow the routine exactly as written. Deviation would not be tolerated. She'd listened without interrupting, nodding at intervals. Then she'd asked the question that should have meant nothing but somehow meant everything. Does she like stories? Not questions about salary or schedule flexibility. Not concerns about his reputation or the armed men stationed throughout the building. Not the medical questions every other candidate had asked, trying to prove their competence. Stories. He'd hired her on the spot, assuming her naivety made her safe, controllable. That decision to hire her would save his daughter's life, but nearly cost him his own. The first morning he'd watched from his office as the waitress entered his daughter's room. Camera 7 gave him the clearest angle. His daughter sat in the chair by the window where she spent most of her waking hours, face turned towards sunlight she couldn't see, hands limp in her lap. The waitress moved quietly through the room, checking the medication bottles on the dresser, straightening the blankets on the bed. Nobody ever disturbed because his daughter rarely slept there anymore. She preferred the chair. Waiting. Always waiting for something that never came. He expected the waitress to speak, to introduce herself the way the others had done, filling silence with nervous chatter about how honoured they were to work for him, how beautiful the apartment was, how precious his daughter seemed. Instead, she picked up the pill organizer and began sorting the afternoon doses without a word. His daughter's head turned slightly toward the sound of pills clicking into compartments. The waitress noticed. She slowed her movements, making each click more deliberate, creating a rhythm. His daughter's fingers twitched against her knee, matching the pattern. Then the waitress did something that made him lean forward until his face was inches from the screen. She sat down on the floor. Not in the chair positioned exactly 3 feet from his daughter for optimal supervision, not standing at the appropriate professional distance, on the floor, cross-legged, eye level with a child who couldn't see her anyway. "My name is Rena," the waitress said, her voice low and steady. "I'm told you don't talk much, and that's fine. I talk enough for both of us." His daughter's face remained expressionless, but her head tilted slightly, listening. "I worked at a diner before this," Rena continued, "the kind where truckers drink coffee at 3 a.m. and teenagers come after midnight looking for French fries and somewhere to exist for a while. I learned that people don't always need you to fill their silence. Sometimes they just need you to sit in it with them." She paused. and in that pause his daughter's shoulders dropped half an inch, a release of tension so subtle he almost missed it. But I also learned that everyone has a story they're dying to tell, if someone will just listen the right way. So when you're ready, I'll be here. And until then, I'll tell you mine. The camera caught the moment his daughter's lips parted, the beginning of something that might have been words but dissolved back into silence. Rena didn't push. She simply stood, returned the medication to the dresser, and began describing what she was doing in a voice that sounded like she was narrating an adventure rather than organizing prescriptions. The blue bottle holds the pills for headaches. They taste like chalk, I'm told, but they work. The white bottle is for sleep, though I suspect you don't need much help with that. And this green one is for anxiety, which seems reasonable considering the circumstances. His daughter's head followed the sound of Rena's voice as she moved around the room. For the first time in months, his daughter looked engaged instead of trapped. He watched for another hour before his enforcer knocked, demanding his attention on matters that usually consumed his days. Territory disputes, shipment schedules, the endless negotiations that kept his empire functioning. But even as he discussed logistics and threats and profits, part of his mind stayed on camera 7, wondering what the waitress was doing now, what she was saying, whether his daughter was still listening. By evening, he'd checked the feed 17 times. That night, reviewing the day's footage, he saw Rena reading to his daughter from a book she'd brought from her bag. Not a children's story about talking animals or magical kingdoms, an actual novel, something with weight and complexity, and she read it like his daughter could understand every word. Because she could. His daughter's intelligence had never been the problem. Her silence was the cage, and every caretaker before Rena had treated the bars as permanent. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt trapped in silence that someone finally helped you break, I'd love to hear about it. Also, don't forget to comment the country you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The first full day should have been ordinary. Rena followed the schedule he'd provided with precision that bordered on military. Medication at 8. Breakfast at 8:30, physical therapy exercises at 9. She documented everything on the clipboard he'd left in the kitchen, her handwriting neat and efficient. From camera 12 in his office, watching her move through the apartment with his daughter, he told himself this was routine monitoring. Standard procedure, nothing more. Then she opened the curtains he'd ordered them kept closed. Light sensitivity, he'd told the previous caretakers, though the real reason was simpler and darker. He couldn't bear to see his daughter sitting in sunlight she'd never witness again, but Rena pulled the heavy drapes back without hesitation, flooding the living room with afternoon brightness that turned the hardwood floors golden. His daughter flinched at first, turning her face away from warmth she could feel but not understand. Rena knelt beside her chair. "That's the sun," she said quietly. "It's been hiding behind those curtains for too long. Your skin needs it, so do you." His hand moved toward the phone to call her, to remind her of the rules, but his daughter's face slowly turned back toward the window, and something in her expression stopped him. She looked curious instead of frightened. The rearranging started after lunch. Rena moved the ottoman from beside the sofa to create a clear pathway between the kitchen and his daughter's bedroom. She shifted the coffee table 6 inches to the left, angled the armchair so it no longer jutted into the walking space. Small changes that he noticed immediately on the camera feeds, each one making him tense. But when his daughter stood to walk to her room for rest time, she moved differently. Her hands reached out at intervals, touching the wall, the door frame, the edge of the relocated furniture, and each touch seemed to orient her rather than startle her. Rena had created sound paths, he realized. Places where his daughter's movements would generate echoes that helped her navigate. He watched her cross the living room with more confidence than she'd shown in months. The humming began while Rena prepared dinner. Nothing elaborate, just the simple pasta dish the nutritionist had approved. But as she stood at the stove, she hummed something low and rhythmic, a melody that filled the kitchen with sound that wasn't silence or clinical instruction. His daughter's head turned toward the kitchen from her position in the living room. Her expression changed. She listened with an intensity that made his chest tighten. When had she last responded to anything with that kind of focus? His office door opened without a knock. His enforcer stepped inside, face grim in the way that usually preceded bad news about territory or rivals or money. "We've got a problem," the man said. "The Volkov family has been asking questions about a child." The words should have commanded his full attention. The Volkovs were the kind of problem that required immediate action, careful planning, potential violence. But his eyes stayed on the monitor showing his daughter, still turned toward the kitchen, toward Rena's humming. "Handle it," he said. "Boss, they've been asking specifically." "I said handle it." The enforcer's jaw tightened, but he knew better than to push. He left, closing the door with more force than necessary. The cameras held his attention for the rest of the afternoon. He missed 2 phone calls and a meeting about a shipment delay, all because he couldn't stop watching Rena with his daughter. It was routine monitoring, he kept telling himself, making sure this new caretaker understood her responsibilities. Nothing more than that, except it was becoming something more, and he knew it. That afternoon's camera feed from the kitchen showed Rena taking his daughter's hand with a gentleness that made every previous caretaker's touch look clumsy. She guided those small fingers to a ceramic bowl on the counter, placing them on something round and textured. "This is an orange," Rena said. "Feel the skin. It's bumpy, like tiny mountains covering a sphere." His daughter's fingers moved slowly across the fruit's surface, exploring with a deliberation he hadn't seen her apply to anything in years. Rena guided her hand to another piece. "This one is a pear, smooth at the top, wider at the bottom. The skin feels like it's been polished." One by one, Rena placed different fruits under his daughter's fingertips. An apple, a bunch of grapes, a lemon that made his daughter jerk back slightly at its unexpected texture. But she didn't pull her hand away. She kept exploring, and with each new discovery, her posture changed. She leaned forward instead of curling inward. Her breathing quickened with something that looked like excitement. Then Rena leaned close and whispered something directly into his daughter's ear. The audio on camera 9 wasn't sensitive enough to catch the words, but he saw the effect immediately. His daughter smiled. Not the polite, empty expression she sometimes offered when adults spoke to her. A real smile, the kind that transformed her entire face, that made her look like the child she'd been before the bomb, before the loss, before the silence that had become her fortress. He rewound the footage, watched it again, tried to read Rena's lips, but whatever she'd said remained a mystery, and that smile haunted him for the rest of the day. 1 week in, and he'd stopped attending morning briefings. His second-in-command handled the collections. His lawyer fielded the calls from associates who needed decisions on territorial matters. His entire empire continued functioning, while he sat in his office cycling through camera feeds like a man possessed. He told himself he was being thorough, careful. Any new person in his daughter's life required close monitoring, but the truth sat heavier in his chest with each passing hour. He couldn't look away. The kitchen had become Rena's classroom. Camera 14 gave him the best angle, positioned above the refrigerator, capturing the entire space where she worked with his daughter each afternoon. Today she'd brought his daughter to the counter, positioning her small hands on the cool granite surface. "Close your eyes," Rena said, then caught herself with a soft laugh. "Sorry, old habit. Just listen." The sound of butter hitting a hot pan filled the kitchen, that sharp sizzle, aggressive and immediate. "What's that?" Rena asked. His daughter tilted her head, concentrating. Her lips moved silently, testing words before releasing them. "Cooking," she whispered. "Good, but what kind of sound? Think about how it feels in your ears." A pause, then stronger this time. Fast, like it's angry. Rena's face lit up with pride that seemed excessive for such a small observation, but she clapped her hands together like his daughter had just solved an impossible equation. "Exactly, that's butter meeting heat. They're fighting, just a little. Now listen to this." She turned on the faucet, filled a pot, set it on the stove. Minutes passed in silence while they waited. Then the first bubbles began rising through the water, creating a sound completely different from the butter, gentle, rhythmic, building slowly. "That's patient," his daughter said without prompting. "That's waiting." Rena's voice caught with emotion. "You're a natural at this. You're hearing what most people miss." The timer on the stove began its mechanical beeping. His daughter identified it immediately. Then the sound of the refrigerator's compressor kicking on, then the distant hum of traffic from 63 floors below. Each sound became a victory, and Rena celebrated every single one with genuine joy that made his daughter stand taller. He watched his daughter smile more in those 15 minutes than she had in 3 years. Later that afternoon, Rena did something every previous caretaker had avoided with careful precision. She sat beside his daughter on the sofa and asked about the one person nobody dared mention in his presence. "Tell me about your mother." The words hung in the air like a challenge. His entire body went rigid. His hand moved towards the phone, ready to call Rena immediately to remind her that some subjects were forbidden. But his daughter's face stopped him. She didn't shut down. She didn't retreat into the silence that usually followed any reference to the past. She turned toward Rena's voice, and when she spoke, her words came out barely above a whisper but clear as glass. She smelled like jasmine. His vision blurred. He gripped the edge of his desk hard enough that his knuckles went white. His wife had worn jasmine perfume every single day. She'd kept a small bottle on her dresser next to the photograph of their wedding day. He'd thrown both away after the funeral, unable to bear the scent that made her absence feel like a physical wound. Rena didn't flinch from the grief in his daughter's voice. She leaned closer, her own voice soft but certain. "Then we'll plant jasmine on the balcony, in pots, so you can touch the leaves whenever you want. You'll know she's near." His daughter's hand found Rena's and held on. The camera captured them sitting together in silence, but it was the kind of quiet that held meaning instead of emptiness. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, couldn't do anything except watch these two people creating something he'd thought was lost forever. That evening, the sound came through clearly enough that he heard it even before checking the camera feed. Laughter. His daughter's laughter, full and bright and completely unguarded. He pulled up camera 6, showing the living room, where Rena had apparently said something that struck his daughter as hilarious. The child's whole body shook with giggles, and Rena joined in, their voices blending together until the entire penthouse rang with joy. He sat frozen at his desk. When was the last time he'd heard that sound? Before the bomb, before the hospital, before the silence that had replaced his daughter's voice and his wife's presence. The laughter continued, and he realized he was crying, his hand pressed against his mouth to keep any sound from escaping. His phone buzzed. A text from building security, all capitals, marked urgent. Volkov family soldiers spotted on the street below. 3 men watching the entrance. Potential threat assessment required immediate attention. He typed back orders for increased security. Double the guards. Run background checks on everyone who entered the building in the past week. Standard protocols that he could execute without thinking. But his eyes stayed on the camera feed. His daughter and Rena were reading together now, the laughter fading into comfortable quiet. Rena's hand rested on his daughter's shoulder, casual and natural, while she turned pages and narrated an adventure story with different voices for each character. Then Rena's eyes lifted, just for a second. She looked directly at camera 6, her gaze meeting the lens with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not surprise, not fear, something closer to acknowledgement. A slight smile touched her lips before she returned her attention to the book. His blood went cold. She knew. How long had she known? Hope is a dangerous thing when you've forgotten what it feels like. It changes how you see everything, including threats you should have noticed sooner. If you've ever watched someone bring light back into a dark place, or if you've been that person for someone else, you understand why some connections are worth the risk. 2 weeks in, and the cameras had become the first thing he checked each morning. Before coffee. Before the news, before the stack of reports his enforcers left outside his office door. He'd wake at 6 and pull up the feeds on his phone, scrolling through angles until he found his daughter and Rena. Usually they were in the kitchen making breakfast together, Rena narrating every step while his daughter's hands learned to crack eggs and measure flour. This morning was different. Rena sat cross-legged on the living room floor, his daughter mirroring her position, and between them lay a pile of fabric samples in various textures and shades. "We're going to talk about colours," Rena said. "Not the way people usually describe them. You're going to understand them better than most people who can see." His daughter's face showed skepticism, but she didn't pull away when Rena took her hand and placed it on a piece of red velvet. Red is the feeling of sun on your face in July, that warmth that's almost too much but you don't want it to stop. It's the sound of your heart beating fast when you're excited or scared. It's the taste of strawberries, sweet but sharp. His daughter's fingers moved across the fabric slowly. "Warm," she said. "Exactly. Now this one." Rena switched to smooth blue silk. Blue is the sound of wind chimes on a cool morning. It's the feeling of water when you first step into a pool. Calm, but deep. It goes on forever if you let it. "Like the sky used to look?" Rena's voice softened. "Like the sky still looks, you just experience it differently now." They continued through the samples. Yellow was laughter and lemonade. Green was grass under bare feet and the smell after rain. Purple was the quiet before sleep and the taste of grapes. His daughter asked questions, testing the concepts, arguing when descriptions didn't match her memories. Rena never dismissed her corrections. She adapted, refined, built a vocabulary of colour that belonged uniquely to his daughter's understanding. He watched for 20 minutes before his second-in-command barged into his office without knocking, face tight with barely controlled frustration. "We need to talk," the man said. "Now." He didn't look up from the monitor. "Later. The Hernandez deal fell through because you missed the meeting. The shipment from the port is sitting in a warehouse because nobody has authority to move it without your approval. And the Volkovs are getting bolder. They had someone follow one of our guys yesterday," I said later. His second-in-command moved between him and the screen. "What the hell is going on with you? For 2 weeks you've been holed up in here, staring at those cameras like they're going to reveal the meaning of life. Your organization is falling apart." The anger came fast and cold. He stood, and his second-in-command took an involuntary step backward. "My organization runs because I built it to run. Handle the Hernandez situation, approve the shipment movement, put extra security on our people. That's why I pay you. Now get out." The man left, jaw clenched, and he returned to the screens. His daughter was laughing at something Rena had said about the color orange. The sound made everything else feel insignificant. That afternoon's footage showed them in the living room again, this time with Rena reading from a thick paperback that clearly wasn't children's literature. He zoomed in on camera 8 until he could read the cover. An adventure novel, the kind with complex plots and morally grey characters, the kind he used to read before his life became nothing but surveillance and survival. Rena read with complete commitment, changing her voice for different characters, building tension in action sequences. But what caught his attention was how she paused at crucial moments. "The hero is trapped in the burning building," Rena read. "He can save the documents that will expose the conspiracy, or he can save the guard who's unconscious in the next room. He only has time for one. What should he do?" His daughter didn't hesitate. "Save the guard. The documents might be copies somewhere else, but you can't make a copy of a person." Rena grinned. "That's a good answer. But what if those documents are the only proof, and without them hundreds of people will suffer? Then save them both. Find a way. The book says that's impossible." His daughter's chin lifted stubbornly. "Then the book is wrong. Heroes find ways." Rena laughed, but it was respectful, not condescending. "You know what? You're right. Let's see if the author agrees with you." She continued reading, and when the hero did indeed find a creative solution to save both the guard and the evidence, his daughter let out a triumphant, "I knew it," that made Rena drop the book to applaud. They debated plot points for another hour. His daughter predicted twists before they happened. She argued about character motivations. She got invested in fictional people's lives with an intensity that proved her mind had been starving for exactly this kind of engagement. The afternoon light shifted through the windows Rena kept open, turning the living room golden. His daughter finally asked the question that changed everything. "Rena, why did you take this job?" The camera caught Rena's pause. She set the book down carefully, taking time to formulate her answer. "I needed the money," she said honestly. "I worked at a diner for 3 years, saving every tip, barely making rent. When the agency called about this position, I jumped at it." "But you stayed," his daughter said. "You could have quit like the others. Father always makes them quit eventually." Rena's hand found his daughter's. "I stay because of you. Because you deserve someone who sees how extraordinary you are." His daughter's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Do you have children?" The question hung in the air. Through the camera he watched Rena's entire body go still. The pause stretched too long, became uncomfortable, carried weight that pressed down on the moment like physical force. When she finally smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. "Not anymore," she whispered. The pain that flashed across her face lasted only a second, but the camera captured it in perfect detail. Raw grief, carefully controlled, held behind a wall that had clearly been built through brutal practice. Then it was gone, replaced by the gentle composure she always showed his daughter. He froze the footage, rewound it, watched that micro-expression again and again, studying every muscle in her face, every shadow in her eyes. The words echoed in his mind. Not anymore. What was Rena hiding? And why did watching her grief make his own feel less suffocating? 3 weeks in, and he needed answers. The words, "not anymore," had burrowed into his mind like shrapnel, sharp and impossible to ignore. He called his investigator at dawn, the man who handled delicate inquiries that required discretion and speed. "Everything," he said. "Employment history, family, medical records, criminal background. I want to know why she came to Chicago and what she left behind." The report arrived by noon. He read it twice, each pass making his chest tighten with a different kind of understanding. Rena had a daughter, past tense, 5 years old when leukemia took her, 2 years ago this past March. The medical bills had destroyed her financially. Her husband, unable to process the grief, had filed for divorce 3 months after the funeral. She'd lost her child, her marriage, and her home in the span of a season. She'd disappeared from her hometown in Wisconsin, severed contact with everyone who knew her before, and resurfaced in Chicago working the overnight shift at a diner where nobody asked questions about the shadows under her eyes. He pulled up archived footage from the past 3 weeks, watching Rena with his daughter through this new lens. Every gentle touch carried different weight now. Every patient explanation, every moment she sat on the floor at his daughter's eye level instead of towering above her. She knew what it meant to lose a child. She understood fragility in ways he'd been too angry to recognize. That morning's camera feed showed his daughter asking the question he now understood Rena must have been dreading. "What was your daughter like?" Camera 11 captured Rena's face in profile. She could have deflected, changed the subject. Every previous caretaker would have, but she'd proven repeatedly that she operated by different rules. "She had your courage," Rena said quietly. "She fought so hard right until the end. Never complained even when I know she hurt. She'd love you, I think. You both refused to let the world make you small." His daughter's hand reached up, searching. Rena guided it to her own face, and those small fingers found the tears streaming down Rena's cheeks. "Don't be sad," his daughter whispered. "I'm here." The words broke something in Rena. She sobbed quietly, holding his daughter's hand against her face, and his daughter leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Two people who understood loss in ways most never would, finding each other in his living room while he watched through a camera he'd hidden to protect against threats he could control. The camera captured mutual healing happening in real time, his daughter comforting someone else, using words instead of silence. Rena accepting comfort instead of maintaining the professional distance every caretaker before her had weaponized. He sat at his desk watching them hold each other and felt the weight of his own isolation like a physical force crushing his chest. His phone shattered the moment. His enforcer's voice came through clipped and urgent. "We had an incident. Volkov family tried to grab one of your suppliers at the warehouse. We stopped them, but they were asking about a child, specifically asking if you had a daughter." The cold that flooded his system had nothing to do with fear for himself. How much do they know? Enough to be dangerous. We need to relocate. Get her out of the city, somewhere they can't track. He looked at the monitor showing his daughter and Rena still holding each other in the living room. His daughter was talking now, her voice too soft for the microphone to catch, but her face showed engagement, connection, life. "No," he said. "Boss, they failed today, but they'll try again. They know she's your weakness." I said, his voice cut through the argument like a blade. "She's finally healing. I'm not tearing her away from the one person who's given her a reason to live. Then she's a target. Then we make this building a fortress. Double the security. Lockdown protocols. Nobody gets within 100 feet of this place without clearance, but she stays here, with Rena." The enforcer's silence spoke volumes, but he didn't argue further. "Understood. I'll implement immediately." The security updates took the rest of the afternoon. New guards at every entrance, biometric scanners, upgraded camera systems with facial recognition tied directly to his phone. He approved everything without hesitation, signing checks that would make his accountant furious. By evening, the building had transformed into something between a home and a bunker. He checked the cameras one final time before attempting sleep. His daughter was in bed, Rena tucking the blankets around her with the same care she applied to everything. She whispered something that made his daughter smile, then moved toward the door. But she didn't leave immediately. She lingered in the doorway, hand on the frame, face turned toward the darkness of the hallway. Then her eyes lifted, found camera 17 embedded in the hallway smoke detector, looked directly into the lens with an expression that made his breath stop. She smiled, just slightly. Just enough. She knew he was watching. Had known perhaps from the beginning. And that smile said something he couldn't quite decipher, but felt in every nerve. Acknowledgement, challenge, understanding, or warning. 4 weeks in, and his daughter had transformed into someone he barely recognized. She talked freely now, asked questions about everything, moved through the apartment with confidence that would have seemed impossible a month ago. The cameras captured her laughter multiple times each day, her voice filling spaces that had been silent for 3 years. This morning, camera 14 showed Rena teaching her to cook scrambled eggs at the stove. His daughter stood at the burner, hands guided by Rena's light touch, learning to feel when the pan reached the right temperature. "The heat tells you when it's ready," Rena said. "Hold your hand above the surface, not touching, just close enough to sense." His daughter's hand hovered over the pan, her face concentrated. "It's warm. Getting warmer. Perfect. Now the butter." Small hands holding the butter dish, placing a pat into the pan. The familiar sizzle. His daughter didn't flinch at the sound anymore. She smiled, recognizing it from their earlier lessons. Now the eggs. Pour them slowly right into the center. The eggs hit the hot butter and his daughter's face showed pure focus. Rena's hands stayed ready but didn't interfere. She let his daughter work, learning through touch and sound and the occasional gentle correction. "You're doing great," Rena said. "See? You're not fragile. You're learning." That's different. His daughter stood straighter at those words. The camera caught her smile, bright and proud as she stirred the eggs with growing confidence. He watched from his office, coffee forgotten on his desk, and felt something crack inside his chest, pride mixed with shame. His daughter was thriving, but not because of anything he'd done, despite him maybe. The afternoon security alert came through his phone with sharp urgency. Building lobby. 3 Volkov soldiers demanding access. His men were holding them back, but the confrontation was escalating. Voices raised, hands moving toward weapons. He watched the lobby feed on his phone while checking the cameras in his apartment. His daughter and Rena were reading in the living room, unaware, safe for now. But the Volkovs wouldn't stop. They were making a statement, showing him they could reach this far, this close. He moved through the apartment fast, his presence shattering the peaceful afternoon like breaking glass. "Pack her things," he ordered Rena without preamble. "We're leaving, now." His daughter's head turned toward his voice, confusion replacing the calm on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice climbing toward panic. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, but his tone betrayed him, sharp, urgent, afraid. His daughter began crying, the sound cutting through him like physical pain. She hadn't cried in weeks. Rena moved toward her immediately, but he blocked her path. "Just pack," he snapped. "Her medication, clothes, whatever she needs." Rena's voice came out steady despite the chaos. "What's happening? Why is she frightened? This doesn't concern you, you're just the help." The words came out harsher than he intended, weaponized by fear and adrenaline. He regretted them the instant they left his mouth, but it was too late. Rena's face showed no anger, just a quiet, devastating clarity. She straightened, met his eyes directly, and spoke with a calm that somehow made her words hit harder. "Then I quit." His daughter's scream cut through the apartment like a siren. "No! Don't leave me!" He froze. His daughter scrambled from the couch, hands reaching desperately through space until they found Rena. She grabbed onto her with both hands, clinging like Rena was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. "Please," his daughter begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't go. You're the only one who sees me." The words destroyed him. His daughter, the child he'd tried to protect with cameras and locked doors and armed guards, was choosing someone else, needed someone else. Saw him as the threat instead of the protector. Being truly seen changes everything. It's the difference between surviving and living, between walls and windows. If someone has ever looked past your defenses and seen who you really are underneath, you know why that connection is worth fighting for. Rena knelt, bringing herself to his daughter's eye level. She took those small hands in hers, her voice gentle but firm. "I won't leave unless you ask me to," she said. Then she looked directly at him, and her next words carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. "But he needs to decide if he trusts me." The apartment went silent except for his daughter's ragged breathing. Trust. The word hung between them like a challenge. He'd built his life on suspicion, on surveillance, on assuming the worst until proven otherwise. It had kept him alive in a world where trust got you killed. But looking at his daughter clinging to Rena, seeing the terror on her face at the thought of losing this woman who'd given her back her voice, he understood something painful and essential. His methods had protected her body. Rena had protected her soul. His enforcer burst through the door, breathing hard, weapon drawn. "They're coming up," he said, voice urgent. "Security's been breached. We have 90 seconds, maybe less." His daughter whimpered, pressing closer to Rena. Rena's arms wrapped around her protectively, her body becoming a shield even though she had no weapons, no training, nothing but the fierce determination on her face. "Get them out," his enforcer continued. "Service elevator to the garage. We have a car waiting. Will she come with us?" His daughter whispered against Rena's shoulder. "Please, father, please don't make her leave." He looked at Rena, still kneeling on the floor, still holding his daughter, like she'd fight anyone who tried to take her away. Her eyes met his with a question that demanded an immediate answer. Trust or control, love or fear. The cameras had shown him everything except how to make this choice. "We go together," he said. "All of us, now." The service elevator descended in stomach-dropping silence. His enforcer had his weapon drawn, eyes on the doors. His daughter pressed against Rena's side, small hands gripping her shirt with desperate strength. He carried nothing but his phone and the gun at his hip. Everything else, the cameras, the security systems, the fortress he'd built, was being abandoned at his back. Above them, through the building's security feed on his phone, he watched the Volkov soldiers breach his penthouse. 3 men, armed, moving through rooms that had been his sanctuary. They found the camera system within minutes, started dismantling it with tools and malicious efficiency. His daughter whimpered. not from pain, but from fear radiating through the enclosed space. "Rena," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Where's Rena?" "Right here," Rena answered immediately, her hand finding his daughter's and holding tight. "I'm not going anywhere." His daughter relaxed slightly at the touch, at the voice. He stood 3 feet away, and she hadn't called for him once. The elevator opened into service tunnels that ran beneath the building, concrete walls, flickering industrial lights, the smell of dampness and old machinery. His enforcer led them through passages that twisted and turned, emergency routes he'd insisted on when buying the building but never thought he'd need. His daughter stumbled on uneven ground. Rena caught her instantly, steadying her with hands that knew exactly where to touch, how much pressure to apply. They moved as one unit through the darkness while he followed behind, watching them together with his own eyes for the first time since this started. All those hours watching through cameras, and he'd never truly seen them, not like this. Not the way Rena's body curved protectively around his daughter. Not the way his daughter trusted every movement Rena made without question. The safe house sat 40 minutes outside Chicago, a nondescript property his organization kept for emergencies. Single-story, basic furniture, reinforced doors and windows. His enforcer swept the interior while they waited in the car, then gave the all clear. Inside, the absence of technology hit him like physical deprivation. No cameras, no monitors, no screens showing him what was happening in rooms he couldn't see, just walls and windows and his daughter's frightened breathing. She wouldn't let go of Rena's hand. When he tried to help her navigate the unfamiliar space, she turned away from him, reaching for Rena instead. "Where's my room?" his daughter asked, her voice small. "Let me show you," Rena said gently, guiding her through the basic layout. "Kitchen to your left, bathroom straight ahead, bedroom on the right. The couch is in the center. I'll help you learn the distances." He stood in the doorway watching them explore the space together. Without camera feeds, without the distance of surveillance, he saw things he'd missed. The way Rena's hands shook when his daughter wasn't touching them, the exhaustion carved into her shoulders, the weight she carried and hid, the fear that flashed across her face when she thought no one was looking, quickly smoothed away before his daughter could sense it. She was terrified. Had been terrified probably since the moment she understood who he was and what his world contained. But she'd stayed anyway. Had chosen his daughter over her own safety with a commitment that shamed every decision he'd made in the past 3 years. Late afternoon bled into early evening, the sun still visible through the windows, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar room. His daughter fell asleep on the couch between them, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. Rena sat on one side, hand resting on his daughter's shoulder. He sat on the other, close enough to protect but too far to touch. The silence stretched until he couldn't bear it anymore.
"You knew about the cameras," he said quietly.
Rena didn't look surprised by the statement. She didn't deny it or deflect. She met his eyes with the same steady honesty she'd shown his daughter from the beginning. "Week 2, she said. "I saw the lens in the kitchen clock. Here. Once I knew what to look for, I found most of them within a few days. Why didn't you say anything?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because they weren't there to spy on me. They were there because you're terrified of losing her, too." The truth of it hit him harder than accusation would have. She understood. Not just his fear, but the way it had twisted into something that hurt the person he was trying to protect. "You could have left," he said. "I could have," Rena agreed. "But she needed someone who would stay. And I needed—" She stopped, looked down at his sleeping daughter, then continued softly. "I needed to matter to someone again." His phone buzzed against his hip, a text from his enforcer still posted at the building. His blood turned cold reading the words. "Volkov soldiers have safe house location. They're watching the property. Unknown how they tracked you. Recommend immediate secondary relocation." He looked up at Rena, at his daughter sleeping peacefully between them, at the windows where somewhere in the growing dusk someone was watching them back. They'd been followed, which meant someone in his organization had betrayed him, and they were trapped in a house with no cameras to show him who was coming. His enforcer arrived within 20 minutes, tension written across every line of his face. They spoke in the kitchen, voices low enough not to wake his daughter still sleeping on the couch. "There's a leak," his enforcer said. "Has to be. Nobody outside the inner circle knew about this location. The Volkovs didn't follow us. They were told where we'd go." The betrayal hit him like a gut punch. Someone in his organization, someone he trusted enough to know about emergency protocols, had sold him out. He ran through names in his mind, analyzing loyalty, looking for cracks. "Lock it down," he ordered. "Nobody moves without my approval. Nobody communicates outside secure channels. And find out who." His enforcer nodded and moved toward the door. Rena appeared beside him before he could follow, her voice quiet but firm. "Can I talk to you?" She glanced toward his daughter, still asleep. Outside, they stood on the small porch, afternoon sun still warming the air despite the danger closing around them. Rena crossed her arms, and when she spoke, her words carried an authority he hadn't heard from her before. Your daughter needs stability, not more fear. The statement hit him wrong, sparking anger he couldn't fully control. You don't understand this world. They'll kill her to hurt me. That's how these people operate. Then stop making her your weakness and start making her your reason, Rena shot back. You've spent 3 years hiding her behind cameras and locked doors, and all you've done is teach her that the world is something to fear. She was learning to be brave until you dragged her into this panic. I'm trying to keep her alive. You're trying to keep her controlled. There's a difference. His hands clenched into fists. The urge to lash out, to remind her she knew nothing about the violence waiting outside these walls, nearly overwhelmed him, but before he could respond, a sound from inside stopped him cold. His daughter was crying, her voice calling out for Rena with raw panic. They both moved at once, but Rena reached her first. She knelt beside the couch, gathering his daughter into her arms with practiced ease. I'm here, Rena said softly. You're safe. I'm right here. I heard yelling, his daughter sobbed. I thought you left. I thought... Shh. I'm not leaving. Feel my hands? They're right here. I'm not going anywhere. Rena began humming something low and rhythmic, a melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep and instinctive. His daughter's breathing, ragged and fast, began to slow. Her shoulders relaxed. The fear that had gripped her features gradually smoothed away. 30 seconds, maybe less. That's how long it took Rena to calm his daughter from full panic to peace. He stood across the room, watching with a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. All his money, all his power, all his careful planning, and he couldn't do what this waitress accomplished in half a minute. She'd learned his daughter's rhythms, understood what she needed, became the anchor his daughter reached for when the world felt unstable. His phone buzzed. A message from his enforcer. Package incoming. Secure footage from the penthouse. The video file loaded slowly, showing his apartment through his own camera system. The Volkov soldiers moved through rooms methodically, opening drawers, checking closets, searching for anything useful. When they found the camera control center hidden in his office closet, they laughed, actually laughed, pointing at the screens, mocking the paranoia that had driven him to install 47 surveillance devices in his own home. Then one of them did something that made his breath stop. The man looked directly into camera 3, the one positioned above his desk, and smiled. He knew exactly where the lens was located, which meant someone had given them detailed information about the entire system. The man's face filled the screen as he leaned closer, speaking directly into the camera like he was having a conversation. We know where you are. We're giving you 24 hours to make a choice. Bring your daughter to the address we'll send. Neutral ground, alone, unarmed. You hand her over, we let you walk away. Or we burn every place you've ever felt safe until there's nowhere left to hide. The video ended. He sat in the safe house bathroom where he'd gone for privacy. Phone gripped so tight his knuckles had gone white. The ultimatum was clear, impossible. They wanted his daughter as leverage, permanent insurance that he'd never move against their family. They'd keep her alive but terrified, a hostage for the rest of her life. Or he could refuse, and they'd hunt them both until someone died. When he emerged from the bathroom, Rena was still on the couch with his daughter, reading quietly. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, making the scene look almost peaceful despite the war being waged around them. Rena looked up, caught his expression, and carefully shifted his daughter to the cushions before crossing to him. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. He looked past her at his daughter, the child who'd finally learned to smile again, who'd found her voice after years of silence, the daughter who reached for Rena instead of him, because he'd never learned how to be what she needed. The answer came from somewhere deeper than strategy or survival instinct. It came from the place where his wife used to live, the part of him that remembered what love looked like before fear had corrupted it. I'm going to do what I should have done 3 years ago, he said. I'm going to let her go. He spoke quietly, the words coming out measured and final. I'll turn myself in to the Volkovs. End the vendetta. They want me, not her. You'll take her into witness protection. My organization will fund everything, protect you both from a distance. She'll have a chance at a normal life. Rena stared at him like he'd suggested setting the house on fire. That's not protection. That's abandonment. It's the only way to keep her safe from my world. She's already in your world, Rena countered, voice rising. You can't undo that. The moment she was born into your family, she became part of everything you are, but you can show her how to survive it instead of teaching her to hide from it. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that running away from your daughter while calling it sacrifice is the same cowardice that put cameras between you instead of having the courage to face her directly. The accusation hit harder than any physical blow. Before he could respond, movement from the couch drew both their attention. His daughter sat up, her face turned toward their voices, tension written across her features. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "What are you fighting about?" He crossed the room, and for the first time in 3 years, he knelt before her. Really knelt, bringing himself to her eye level the way Rena always did. He took her hands in his, feeling how small they were, how fragile. The truth came harder than any confession he'd ever made to law enforcement or rival families, but she deserved honesty more than protection from reality. "I need to tell you something about the work I do," he began, "about why people want to hurt us, about the danger you've been in since you were born." He explained it as simply as he could. His organization, the rival families, the violence that existed just outside the walls he'd built, the enemies who would use her to hurt him. His daughter listened without interrupting, her face showing concentration rather than fear. "I thought hiding you would keep you safe," he finished. "I was wrong." His daughter's response came without hesitation. "I don't want to hide. I want to be brave, like her." She gestured toward Rena, and he turned to see tears streaming down Rena's face. "You installed cameras because you couldn't bear to watch her directly," Rena said, her voice thick with emotion. "You hired me because I was nobody. Disposable, someone who wouldn't matter if things went wrong." Each word landed like an indictment he couldn't dispute. "But she's not your weakness," Rena continued. "She's your reason to be better, to fight differently, to show her that strength isn't about walls and weapons. It's about standing beside the people you love instead of watching them from a distance." His phone rang, shattering the moment. His enforcer's voice came through urgent and sharp. "Found the leak. You're not going to like this. Tell me." "It's the camera system itself. The Volkovs have been monitoring your feeds for weeks. They bought access from the security company that installed the equipment. Every camera you used to watch your daughter, they were using to track her movements, learn her patterns. The system you built to protect her gave them everything they needed to find her." The phone nearly slipped from his hand. The cameras, the 47 devices he'd hidden throughout his home, the surveillance that had consumed his life for 3 years, the technology he'd trusted more than human connection. All of it had been compromised. He had been feeding his daughter's location to his enemies while thinking he was keeping her safe. Rena's voice cut through his shock. "Then maybe it's time to stop watching and start seeing." The simplicity of it hit him like revelation. He'd been so focused on monitoring every threat, analyzing every danger through camera feeds, that he'd forgotten how to actually look at his daughter, how to be present instead of surveilling, how to trust instead of verify. His enforcer was still on the line, waiting for orders. The Volkovs expected surrender or continued hiding. They expected him to make the same choices he'd always made, driven by fear and the need for control. But his daughter wanted to be brave. Rena had shown her how. And maybe it was time he learned the same lesson. "New plan," he said into the phone. "I'm done hiding. Done running, done watching from behind screens. We're going on offense. Coordinate with our allies. I want the Volkovs contained, their leadership exposed to federal investigation. Legal pressure, not violence. And get protection from my daughter that doesn't involve hiding her away like she's already dead." His enforcer's surprise carried through the line. "Boss, that's going to take time. Resources, coordination with people outside the organization. Then start now." He ended the call and looked at Rena, at the woman who'd walked into his home a month ago asking about stories and somehow taught both him and his daughter how to live instead of just survive.
"I need to ask you something,
He said,
and I need the truth."
"Will you stay? Not as an employee, as family." 2 months later, the Chicago penthouse looked different. The cameras were gone. All 47 of them dismantled and disposed of, except for one legitimate security camera in the entryway. Natural light filled every room through open curtains. The apartment felt lived in rather than monitored. His daughter moved through the space with confidence that still amazed him. She navigated corners, avoided furniture, found doorways without hesitation. The sound paths Rena had created that first week had become permanent features, the apartment redesigned around his daughter's needs rather than his fears. Rena was still there, not as hired help but as legal guardian with shared custody rights. She took his daughter to therapy appointments, accompanied her to the special school where she was thriving, sat through music lessons where his daughter was learning piano by touch and sound. The legal documents had been complicated, but his lawyers had made it work. He'd restructured his organization, delegating authority to people he'd learned to trust. He attended fewer meetings, came home earlier, actually lived in the apartment instead of watching it through screens. This morning they sat together at the breakfast table. His daughter told an elaborate story about a boy at school who'd tried to cheat at a game during recess, complete with dramatic voices and gestures. Both adults laughed, the sound easy and natural. He caught Rena's eye across the table, saw his daughter between them, and felt something settle in his chest. His wife would have wanted this. Not the cameras, not the isolation, not the fear. Just their daughter, surrounded by people who loved her, learning to navigate the world with courage instead of hiding from it. The doorbell rang. He checked the legitimate security camera showing his enforcer standing outside, alone and unarmed. When he opened the door, the man's expression held news. "The Volkovs are done," his enforcer said quietly. "FBI took down their leadership this morning. Racketeering, trafficking, the whole network. They'll be locked up for decades." The relief should have been complete, but his enforcer's face showed something else, something his daughter didn't need to hear. "And the deal?" he asked. "Signed. Immunity for your daughter, clean record for Rena, and you've got 18 months starting next week." Rena appeared beside him, having heard enough. After his enforcer left, she waited until his daughter was occupied with her audiobook before confronting him. 18 months of what?" she asked, though her face said she already knew. "Federal minimum security," he admitted. "I turned informant on a bigger operation. Testified about trafficking networks, supply chains, the organizations above mine. The deal protects both of you completely. When I get out, I'm done with that world." Her eyes filled with tears. "You did this for her?" "I did this for all of us," he said, "so we could have a chance at something real." The birthday party happened on a Saturday afternoon, held in the safe house they'd converted into a permanent second home. Small gathering, carefully chosen guests. The men from his organization who'd become chosen family, watching his daughter with protective fondness. Her new school friends, navigating the party games Rena had adapted for someone who experienced the world differently. His daughter blew out the candles on her cake with Rena's hands guiding hers, both of them laughing when she missed on the first try. The room filled with applause and off-key singing. Later, after the guests had left, he found his daughter on the porch with Rena, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "What did you wish for?" he asked, sitting beside them. His daughter turned toward his voice, her expression serious despite the frosting still on her chin. "I wished that I could see you both just once so I'd remember your faces forever." The words broke something in him. Rena's hand found his across their daughter, their fingers intertwining while tears streamed down both their faces. "You don't need to see us," Rena said softly. "We're here. We're staying." He found his voice through the emotion. "And when I come back, I'll be better, I promise." His daughter reached out, finding both their hands, holding them together. The three of them sat in the fading sunlight, connected not by surveillance or obligation, but by choice. By love earned through showing up, through being present, through the courage to be seen completely. He'd spent 3 years watching his daughter through cameras, terrified of facing her pain directly, of seeing his failure reflected in her sightless eyes. It had taken a stranger with nothing but kindness to teach him the difference between watching and seeing, between monitoring and loving, between hiding behind technology and having the courage to be vulnerable. The cameras had never showed him what mattered most. They'd only revealed what he'd been too afraid to face. That his daughter didn't need a fortress. She needed a father. And sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected places, through the most unlikely people, when you finally stop watching from a distance and start living in the moment. If this story moved you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. And I would really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts about my videos in the comments. Your feedback helps me improve and create even better content for you. Thank you for being here.